Ostend, Belgium. Winter 1981. One of the greatest voices in American music is living in a small apartment above a bakery 3,000 miles from home. He hasn't had a hit in 4 years. His label thinks he's finished. His bank account is empty. And he's convinced that if he returns to the United States, someone will kill him. Marvin Gaye is 42 years old, broke and hiding. The man who gave the world What's Going On and Let's Get It On now spends his days walking along the Belgian coast, watching ships disappear into the horizon. He's trying to outrun two things: the IRS, which claims he owes them over $1 million, and something darker, a feeling that he's already used up all his chances. But in a studio in Belgium, something unexpected is happening. Gaye is working on music again. Not because he wants to, because he has to. His Belgian hosts, a promoter, and his family are paying his bills. The deal is simple. They'll support him if he records. What no one knows yet, not the label executives who've written him off, not the radio programmers who've forgotten him, not even Gaye himself, is that he's about to create the biggest comeback of his career, and that it will cost him everything. To understand why Marvin Gaye ended up in Belgium, you have to go back to the wreckage he left behind in Los Angeles. By 1980, his life had collapsed in slow motion. His marriage to Anna Gordy, sister of Motown founder Berry Gordy, ended in a brutal divorce that left him financially destroyed. The judge ordered him to pay Anna from his next album's royalties, which meant Gaye recorded Here My Dear in 1978 as an angry confessional album about their failed marriage. It was commercially disastrous. His second marriage, to Janice Hunter, was falling apart under the weight of his cocaine addiction and paranoia. He'd become convinced that people were trying to kill him. He kept a gun. He stopped touring. His creativity, once unstoppable, had turned inward and toxic. Motown dropped him. Columbia Records picked him up, but the relationship was cold. They wanted hits. He wanted artistic freedom. Neither side trusted the other. When the IRS came after him for back taxes, Gaye made a decision that seemed insane to everyone around him. He left America. His friend Freddy Coussert, a Belgian promoter who'd worked with him before, offered him refuge. Gaye accepted. He packed a bag and disappeared to Europe. But exile wasn't escape. It was just a different kind of prison. Gaye had no money, no momentum, no clear way forward. And he knew that at his age, in an industry obsessed with youth, this might be his last shot. The music industry had moved on. The Motown sound that made him famous felt like ancient history. Synthesizers and drum machines were taking over. Michael Jackson's Off the Wall had redefined what pop soul could be. Prince was building a new kind of black superstar image. Marvin Gaye's old playbook didn't work anymore, so he had to invent a new one. The sessions in Belgium started slowly. Too slowly. Gaye had always been a perfectionist, but now his perfectionism had calcified into paralysis. He'd work for hours on a single vocal phrase, then erase it. He'd build a track, then dismantle it the next day. The cocaine didn't help. It amplified his obsessiveness without improving his focus. The studio became a witness to his unraveling. Equipment sat unused, tape reels piled up with abandoned takes. Gaye would arrive at midnight and work until dawn, then sleep through the afternoon. When he was awake, he talked in circles, about Motown, about his ex-wives, about God and sex and death. Everything except the album he was supposed to be making. Freddy Coussert's family was patient, but the money was running out. They'd invested in studio time, equipment, living expenses, and Gaye wasn't delivering. Every week Coussert would ask, "When can we hear something finished?" Gaye would promise, "Soon, next week, when it's ready." But ready never came. There was another problem: the sound. Gaye wanted to work with new technology. Synthesizers, drum machines, sequencers, but he didn't know how to use them. He'd spent his entire career working with live musicians, analog tape, and old-school production. Now he was trying to teach himself a new musical language in his 40s, while high, while broke, while convinced he was out of time. Harvey Fuqua, Gaye's longtime friend and former brother-in-law, flew to Belgium to check on him. What he found worried him. Gaye was thin, distracted, talking in circles. The music he was working on sounded unfinished, tentative. There was no single, no obvious direction, no clear reason to believe this would work. And Columbia Records was getting impatient. They'd given Gaye a deal, but they wanted results. Label executives started making calls. When was the album coming? What did it sound like? Was Marvin Gaye still relevant? No one had good answers. Fuqua reported back to Columbia. "It's not ready. Gaye's not ready." The label gave him an ultimatum. Finish it by fall, or we're moving on. But in those messy, uncertain sessions, something was starting to emerge. Gaye was writing about sex again, but differently. Not the romantic, sensual celebration of "let's get it on." Something more adult, more complex, more wounded. He was writing about needing connection, about using pleasure to push away pain, about the distance between what desire promises and what it actually delivers. He didn't know it yet, but he was writing sexual healing. The question was whether he'd finish it before the money ran out, or before he gave up on himself completely. The breakthrough came from an unexpected place, a Belgian nightclub. Gaye had been going out at night, dancing, watching people move to the new electronic sounds flooding dance floors, Italo disco, synth funk, early house music. He noticed something. People responded to rhythm differently now. Not the complex polyrhythms of Motown. Something simpler, more hypnotic, more machine-driven. He brought that observation back to the studio. With Odell Brown on keyboards and Harvey Fuqua co-producing, Gaye started building tracks around drum machine patterns. The Roland TR-808 became the foundation. The same machine that would define hip-hop was now shaping his comeback. But this created immediate friction. Brown and Fuqua were old-school musicians. They didn't trust the machines. They wanted live drums, live bass, the warmth of analog soul. Gaye insisted on the programmed beats. It sounded cold, they said. "Exactly," he responded. "That's the point." The tension in the studio went beyond aesthetics. This was about survival. If Gaye made a safe, nostalgic album, he'd be admitting defeat, confirming that he was a relic. But if he pushed too far into experimental territory, he risked creating something uncommercial. Another expensive failure, another reason for Columbia to drop him. The lyrics to Sexual Healing came fast. Gaye wrote about needing physical connection as medicine. "When I get that feeling, I need sexual healing." It wasn't romantic. It was desperate, primal, the kind of honesty that made people uncomfortable. Columbia executives heard an early mix. Their response was lukewarm. It was too slow for radio, too explicit, too stark. Where were the strings? Where was the Marvin Gaye they remembered? Gaye refused to change it. This tension between what he wanted to make and what the industry expected had defined his entire career. Usually he compromised. This time he didn't. Maybe because he had nothing left to lose. Or maybe because he knew this was his last chance to say something true. The rest of the album came together around that core tension. Till Tomorrow explored the same themes of temporary connection. Joy pushed further into electronic territory. My Love Is Waiting brought back some of the romantic Gaye, but with synthesizer washes that felt modern. And then there was Third World Girl, a track that went nowhere near American radio, but showed Gaye engaging with reggae and global sounds. He was trying to prove he could still evolve. But to Columbia, it felt like wasted studio time. The pressure was mounting. The album was taking too long. Money was running out. Columbia wanted it done. Gaye kept tweaking, re-recording, second-guessing. The cocaine habit wasn't helping his decision-making. Some days he was brilliant, other days he couldn't function. His Belgian hosts were losing patience. His label was sending warning signals. And Gaye was increasingly convinced that even if he finished the album, it wouldn't matter. The industry had already decided he was finished. Fuqua finally had to force the issue. "We're done," he told Gaye. You have to let this go." In September 1982, Midnight Love was finished, barely, and just in time. But no one knew if anyone would care. Columbia Records released Sexual Healing as the lead single in October 1982. And almost immediately something strange happened. Radio programmers didn't know what to do with it. It was too slow for the mainstream pop stations that played Michael Jackson and Hall & Oates. Too explicit for adult contemporary. Too electronic for traditional R&B stations still playing live instrumentation. But people, actual listeners, responded instantly. Record stores couldn't keep it in stock. Black radio stations started playing it on repeat, not because it fit the format, but because listeners kept calling in to request it. Then white pop stations noticed. Then dance clubs. Within 6 weeks, Sexual Healing was climbing the charts in a way that no one predicted. It wasn't being pushed by the industry. It was being pulled by demand. By December, it hit number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100. For a 43-year-old artist who hadn't had a top 10 hit since 1977, this wasn't just a comeback, it was a resurrection. But the success created a new problem. Marvin Gaye had to come home. He'd been hiding in Belgium for nearly 2 years. Now, with a massive hit, everyone wanted him. Television shows, radio interviews, live performances. Columbia Records was already planning a tour. The Grammy Awards wanted him to perform. His absence was no longer sustainable. But the problems that drove him into exile hadn't disappeared. The IRS still wanted their money. His relationship with his father, Marvin Gaye Sr., remained toxic and unresolved. His cocaine use had gotten worse, not better. And beneath everything else, there was the paranoia. Gaye had told friends in Belgium that he had a premonition about going back to America. He said it calmly, like stating a fact. If he went home, he would die. Harvey Fuqua dismissed it as drug-fueled anxiety. Freddie Coussaert thought he was being dramatic. They convinced him to return. The album was too big. The opportunity was too rare. In January 1983, Marvin Gaye flew back to Los Angeles. Midnight Love peaked at number 7 on the Billboard 200. The album went platinum. It was his biggest commercial success in over a decade, and the clock started ticking on the final 16 months of his life. The full Midnight Love album arrived in October 1982, riding the wave of Sexual Healing. Critics didn't know what to make of it at first. This wasn't the socially conscious Marvin Gaye of What's Going On. This wasn't even the sensual bedroom singer of Let's Get It On. This was something different. Stripped down, electronic, emotionally ambiguous. Some reviewers praised the boldness. Robert Christgau gave it a positive review, noting Gaye's willingness to sound vulnerable and modern. Others were confused by the synthesizers, the drum machines, the minimal arrangements. Where was the Motown sophistication? Where were the strings and horns? But the public didn't care about the critical debate. Sexual Healing was everywhere. It crossed over in ways that few R&B songs managed in 1982. White audiences embraced it. Black audiences reclaimed it as proof that Gaye still mattered. Dance clubs played the extended 12-inch mix. Adult contemporary stations played the radio edit. The second single, My Love Is Waiting, did solid business but didn't replicate the phenomenon. It peaked at number 34 on the Hot 100. The album kept selling anyway. What made Midnight Love work wasn't just the music, it was the story behind it. Here was a legend, written off as a casualty of the 70s, using new technology to create something timeless. The exile narrative added weight. This wasn't a calculated comeback. It felt desperate and necessary. But there was cognitive dissonance happening in real time. Sexual Healing was being played at weddings, used in romantic contexts, treated like smooth baby-making music. But if you listen closely to the lyrics, when I get that feeling, I need sexual healing. It wasn't romantic, it was compulsive. It was about using sex to medicate pain. People heard what they wanted to hear. Meanwhile, Gaye was back in Los Angeles, trying to navigate sudden fame after years of obscurity. Columbia Records pushed him to tour. He agreed, reluctantly. The Sexual Healing Tour launched in April 1983. It was successful but chaotic. Some nights Gaye was brilliant. Other nights he barely functioned. Between shows, the paranoia worsened. He started carrying a gun again. He talked about death constantly. Friends noticed he'd lost weight, lost focus. The cocaine use was no longer recreational. It was maintenance. And yet, on stage, something remarkable happened. When Gaye performed Sexual Healing, the song transformed. It became a communal moment. Audiences sang along like they were in church. The irony wasn't lost on Gaye, the son of a Pentecostal preacher. His most explicitly sexual song was being received like gospel. By the end of 1983, Sexual Healing had earned Marvin Gaye 2 Grammy Awards: Best Male R&B Vocal Performance and Best R&B Instrumental Performance. It was his first Grammy wins in over a decade. He didn't attend the ceremony. He was too deep into the collapse. The success of Midnight Love should have solved Marvin Gaye's problems. Instead, it amplified them. The money came in, but it went right back out. To the IRS, to his ex-wives, to lawyers, to drug dealers. Gaye was rich on paper and broke in practice. The financial pressure that drove him to Belgium hadn't disappeared. It had just multiplied. The tour ended in August 1983. Gaye returned to Los Angeles exhausted and increasingly erratic. He moved in with his parents at their home on Gramercy Place in the Crenshaw district. It was supposed to be temporary. It wasn't a safe choice. Marvin Gaye Sr., his father, was a bitter man. A failed minister who'd spent his life resenting his son's success. Their relationship had always been fraught, marked by psychological abuse, religious judgment, and unresolved rage. Now they were living under the same roof again, and the old patterns reasserted themselves immediately. Gaye's cocaine use spiraled. He stopped working on new music. Columbia Records wanted a follow-up to Midnight Love, but Gaye couldn't deliver. He couldn't even start. The creative well that had produced Sexual Healing had run dry. Friends who visited him described a man who'd checked out. He talked about death constantly, not with fear but with resignation. "I'm ready," he told Harvey Fuqua. "I've done what I came here to do." The paranoia intensified. Gaye believed people were plotting against him. He kept a .38 revolver. He gave it to his father for safekeeping, then demanded it back. The house on Gramercy Place became a pressure cooker. On April 1, 1984, one day before his 45th birthday, Marvin Gaye got into an argument with his father over a misplaced insurance document. The fight escalated. Gaye physically confronted his father. Minutes later, Marvin Gaye Sr. retrieved the .38 revolver his son had given him. He shot Marvin Gaye twice, once in the chest, once in the shoulder at point-blank range. Marvin Gaye died at California Hospital Medical Center at 1:01 p.m. The man who'd created one of the most life-affirming songs of the 1980s, a song about healing through connection, died alone, shot by his father, in a house that should have been refuge. The album that brought him back from exile had only bought him 16 more months. In the immediate aftermath of Gaye's death, Sexual Healing took on a new, darker meaning. Listeners went back to Midnight Love and heard things they'd missed. The desperation, the loneliness, the way every song on the album circled around the same theme. Temporary connection as a way to avoid permanent pain. Critics who'd been lukewarm about the album's electronic sound reassessed. What had seemed like a commercial concession now looked like artistic bravery. Gaye had stripped away the lush arrangements that defined his career and exposed something raw. The song itself became a cultural touchstone. But its meaning shifted. In 1982, it was a comeback hit, smooth and radio-friendly. After 1984, it became a eulogy. People heard the need in Gaye's voice differently. The line, "I need sexual healing," stopped sounding playful and started sounding like a cry for help. Music historians began placing Midnight Love in context. It was Gaye's final artistic statement, and it showed an artist refusing to repeat himself. At an age when most of his peers were coasting on nostalgia, he'd embraced drum machines, synthesizers, and a new sonic vocabulary. The album's influence on R&B became clearer with time. The sparse electronic production, once criticized as cold, became a template. Artists like D'Angelo, Maxwell, and later Frank Ocean would use similar approaches: minimal instrumentation, drum machine foundations, emotionally complex lyrics about desire and disconnection. Sexual healing never left the culture. It's been sampled dozens of times, covered by artists across genres, and used in films and television constantly. But unlike many hits that become nostalgia objects, it retained its strange power. Partly because of Gaye's vocal performance, vulnerable, aching, deeply human, and partly because the song's core idea, that we use physical connection to treat emotional wounds, never stops being relevant. By the 1990s, Midnight Love was recognized as one of Gaye's essential albums, alongside What's Going On and Let's Get It On, not despite its darkness, but because of it. Midnight Love did something that few comeback albums achieve. It changed how people remembered the artist who made it. Before 1982, Marvin Gaye's legacy was split. Half the world remembered him as a socially conscious pioneer, the man who made What's Going On and challenged Motown to take black music seriously. The other half remembered him as a romantic singer, the architect of Let's Get It On and Bedroom Soul. Midnight Love added a third dimension: Marvin Gaye as a survivor. As someone who'd hit bottom, rebuilt himself, and created art that was both contemporary and timeless. It proved that artistic reinvention was possible after 40, after exile, after failure. The album's influence rippled outward in unexpected ways. Its use of drum machines and synthesizers helped legitimize electronic production in R&B. Before Sexual Healing, synthesizers were still seen as novelty instruments or disco tools. After it, they became standard equipment. Artists who came after Gaye pointed to Midnight Love as proof that you could age in R&B without becoming irrelevant. Prince studied it. D'Angelo referenced it. Even hip-hop producers, particularly those building quiet storm tracks in the 90s, borrowed its minimalist approach. The song's structure influenced slow jam production for decades. That steady, hypnotic drum machine pattern. The space between elements. The way the vocal sits right in front, vulnerable and exposed. It became a blueprint. But the album's cultural legacy is more complicated. Sexual Healing became so ubiquitous that it was easy to forget how strange and brave it was in 1982. A 43-year-old artist in exile, making a song about compulsive desire on a drum machine, and somehow making it a massive pop hit. The tragedy of Gaye's death 16 months later only deepened the album's meaning. Midnight Love became a final testament, not just to his talent, but to the cost of being an artist who couldn't stop searching for something he couldn't name. It's been sampled in hip-hop, covered in jazz, reimagined in electronic music. The album sold over 6 million copies worldwide. Sexual Healing was inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame. The song has been streamed over 1 billion times across platforms. But numbers don't capture what Midnight Love actually accomplished. It gave one of the most important voices in American music a proper farewell. It proved that artistic risk could still pay off, even when everyone had written you off. And it created a song that became bigger than the man who made it. Midnight Love is a masterclass in creative survival. When Marvin Gaye arrived in Belgium in 1981, he had every reason to give up. His career was over. His personal life was destroyed. His industry had moved on. The smart money said he'd never have another hit. He could have played it safe. He could have made a nostalgic Motown album, chasing the sound that made him famous. Instead, at 42, he taught himself new technology and made the most contemporary-sounding record of his career. That choice matters. Because it shows that artistic evolution isn't about age or timing. It's about willingness. Gaye could have relied on his voice and his past. Instead, he stripped everything away and rebuilt from the ground up. The album also teaches something darker, that success doesn't heal what's broken. Gaye got everything he wanted with Midnight Love. Critical validation, commercial success, cultural relevance. But it didn't save him. The demons that drove him into exile followed him home. Sexual healing captured something true about human desperation. We medicate pain with pleasure. We reach for connection when we feel most alone. And sometimes the things that heal us temporarily are the same things that destroy us slowly. Gaye knew that. You can hear it in every line of the song. The tension between the smooth, seductive surface and the raw need underneath. It's not a celebration of sex. It's a confession about using it as medicine. 40+ years later, Midnight Love still matters because it's the sound of an artist refusing to fade quietly. It's a document of someone fighting for one more chance, one more moment, one more song, and getting it. The irony is brutal and beautiful. Marvin Gaye's greatest comeback was also his final act. He returned from exile, created a masterpiece, and paid the ultimate price. Midnight Love saved his legacy but couldn't save his life. That's the lesson. Art can redeem a career. It can define a generation. It can outlive its creator. But it can't heal the person who made it. Marvin Gaye gave us Sexual Healing, a song about needing connection to survive. Then he showed us what happens when the healing runs out.